Noam Chomsky, the world-renowned linguist, is this great intellectual thinker. Went on the Useful Idiots podcast. It was hosted by Katie Halpert and Matt Taibbi, both writers at Rolling Stone. I know Matt is, I think Katie is as well. And so one of the questions that they asked was, what do you think about Bernie's campaign? Was there some maybe mistakes or pitfalls they could have avoided? What did you think about his chances? And Chomsky's response is something that has been echoed both by me and people like Kyle Klinsky of Secular Talk and others as well. Just about how Bernie Sanders he identified as a democratic socialist, and how, just from a political perspective, Chomsky thought that just was not the best route to go because of the basically 100 plus years of the media and our government totally demonizing and misconstruing what the socialist label means and actually represents. When Chomsky pointed out, basically used the label of democratic socialist or social democrat in any other country on the face of the earth besides, really authoritarian or totalitarian regimes, then it just means, a democrat. It doesn't have all of the baggage that comes with it when you use that label in the US. So that was kind of one of the pitfalls that Chomsky attributed to Bernie and his campaign, was around using that democratic socialist label. Chomsky thought it would have made a lot more sense for Bernie Sanders to say, basically, I'm an old-fashioned New Deal Democrat. I'm trying to keep up with the other countries, just trying to bring, America up, United States up to the standards that we used to have with regards to, education. Be the way that we were 60, 70 years ago with higher education and things like the GI Bill that really, expanded who was able to, obtain higher education. And so that was kind of one of his big criticisms, was just that of the, using that socialist label, which, if more people, were able to look beyond the mainstream media and what's puppeted by, people like Trump, or even members of the corporate Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the media as well. It wouldn't have been as big of a deal for Bernie Sanders to use that label, but then you also have that 100-year history, basically since the revolution that took place in Russia in 1917. The United States, the government, and the mainstream corporate media has just been hammering away that socialism's bad, gulag. They want to completely control your lives in these negative ways, and just not giving any type of actual substantive explanation of what democratic socialist policy or platform looks like. Because actually, when you go through it issue by issue, people overwhelmingly support Bernie Sanders' policy positions. Like the exit polls of the first 20 states in this primary season, voters overwhelmingly supported things like Medicare for all, for example. Joe Biden doesn't support that. Bernie Sanders does. So, it's really sad that people are so easily tricked and manipulated, but I shouldn't say so easily, because again, this process of demonizing socialist or socialism has been going on for 100 plus years, and unfortunately it's still pretty effective, especially on older folks. The younger you are, the more favorable opinion people tend to have with regards to socialism, and the more negative views they have towards capitalism, if they are younger. So just, Chomsky was just pointing out basically how out of whack the U.S. is on this issue, and just how he said it was just the United States with how we view and treat the idea of, a socialist candidate or socialist or candidate identifying as a democratic socialist is just completely off the spectrum compared to any other country in the world. And it's, in all these other countries, Chomsky was saying that the Democratic Socialist label is seen as a normal position in almost all other countries. And his basically, yeah, I just wanted Bernie to identify as a New Deal Democrat, continue forward, these New Deal policies. Eisenhower, a Republican president, back in the late 50s, early 60s, right? Eisenhower said, if you don't support these New Deal policies, you don't belong in our government. Just bringing it back to that message, and just focusing on the major policies of universal health care or Medicare for all, as well as free higher education, catching us up to the rest of the developed world. They already have these policies. It'll save money. And then as well as, doing a lot of messaging around the issue of universal health care, for example, how, it doesn't really make sense for people to want to support, paying $10 to a private health insurance company or corporation when they could be paying $5 in taxes and have all of their healthcare needs met, be free at the point of service, not having to worry about bankruptcy or making these co-payments or deductibles or premiums, all of these things. So he had some kind of suggestions a little bit around messaging. I think Bernie Sanders did that fairly well, saying how it would cost less than our current healthcare system. But so those are some of the issues that Chomsky pointed out. I haven't listened to the whole interview. I think I'm going to do that while I eat dinner, but that was at least through the part of the interview with Taibbi and Halpert. Chomsky was just saying that it was a pretty big mistake of Bernie to use the Democratic Socialist label. And I mean, I've been saying that Bernie Sanders, again, should have been using, I'm trying to continue FDR's policy, these New Deal policies. I'm trying to catch us up with the rest of the world. I'm not a radical. I'm actually, a moderate. All these other countries have universal health care, tuition-free higher education, and these things save money. They keep people from going bankrupt or being shackled with student loan debt. They save people's lives. They make us a more healthy and better educated populace. All of these things, and I think it just sometimes Bernie has a inability to change his message to different populations, or when the kind of political climate or environment dictates that he needs to change his message, he's kind of not as quick to do so as perhaps he should be. I think that's a pretty decent critique of Bernie, is that he just doesn't really tailor his message to different audiences, or when the political winds shift on certain issues. Because he's just, really set on hammering away at what he thinks, works in those situations. And Chomsky also pointed out how, the youth vote did not show up as Bernie and his team thought they would. The turnout was up, but the turnout by the older folks was even higher. And, again, like I was saying, especially for older folks who grew up during, the Red Scare and McCarthyism and all of those kind of other things, has had a bigger impact on them with regards to the socialist label than it would for the younger generations who haven't been exposed to as much of that propaganda as these older generations. So pretty interesting. I always love hearing Chomsky's perspective on just current events, politics, foreign relations, domestic policy, whatever, just because he's such a wealth of knowledge and just a great resource. And highly recommend checking out that interview. Again, just YouTube, Useful Idiots, Noam Chomsky, it'll pop up. So I would love to hear your thoughts about Chomsky's criticisms of the Sanders campaign, as well as anything else at this point. So share your thoughts in the comment sections down below.